up, fam? This is Dr. Jali welcoming you to another episode of Thriving Throughout. Today, we are talking about trauma and how it affects children. But first, let's do a quick recap. Trauma is an event that causes deep distress, upset, or disturbance in a person who is witnessing, experiencing, or learning about the event. A person who is traumatized has long-term responses to the traumatic event. Children experience trauma in many different ways, such as divorce or accidents, or learning about someone who has been hurt or died, or watching a violent assault, or family violence or community violence. Just like with grown-ups, children manifest trauma in many different ways. Kids tend to act out their trauma rather than talk about it. In younger kids, you might see more tantrum behaviors, outbursts, immaturity, whereas in older kids, you might see more activities in terms of sexual promiscuity, substance abuse, and maybe acting older than they should be. Kids don't always have the words or the voice to fully describe or even understand feelings and the reactions that the traumatic situation may have evoked. Look at their behavior, their habits. Are they doing things that they didn't do before? Have they lost some skills? The key is to note whether or not your child is doing something differently from what they used to do before. So if they were already a picky eater, then you don't necessarily have to worry if they don't have a typical appetite. If they already had trouble sleeping, using the bathroom, that doesn't automatically become a symptom of trauma. Risk and protective factors help grown-ups determine how quickly and smoothly a child will recover from a traumatic event. There are a lot of factors that go into how significantly a child responds to a trauma. Caregiver and parent responses often have the biggest impact on how well they recover. Children do have built-in protective factors. Kids that have a generally pleasant disposition, get along with people, recover from setbacks quickly, those are the ones that are more likely to recover from traumatic situations in more healthy manners and maybe a little bit more quickly. It's the kids that really have a hard time connecting with people, moving on even if something small happens. Those are the ones that you really want to kind of look out for and make sure that they're okay. Always check in, monitor behavior, take note, know who your child is, and determine whether this is something that is consistent with their usual personality and characteristics, or if this is something that you want to make sure that they're receiving support for. Trauma is inherited both biologically and socially. There are studies that actually suggest that trauma overwrites DNA and gets passed down physically. So even if your child never ever experiences a traumatic event, which is highly unlikely, they're still going to be dealing with the impact of the trauma that has affected you. Our children are definitely going to be impacted by centuries and centuries of traumatic experiences that have been passed down from generation to generation. Two of the things that I tend to find very disturbing in our community are the acts of overcorrecting and negative speech. If we feel that they're not doing what we think they should be doing. Many people who have grown up in Black households and communities have taken note of the collective negative and toxic traits that we don't want to pass down to the next generation. Things like overcriticism and correction of minor infractions, negative speak, poor communication skills, and deterring one another from speaking out about our own feelings and emotions. We don't seek perfection in our kids. No one is perfect. We want to make sure that they know it's okay to make mistakes, that you will love them, and that they can recover if things go wrong. Perhaps the most painful thing about being traumatized is that the person's feeling of safety, normalcy, and control has been taken away from them. And for a child, that's probably even more devastating because they're just learning about how the world works. Any situation is actually shaping who they are becoming. So when we come across a child who we suspect or know for a fact has been traumatized, the first thing we want to do is make sure that they feel safe, that they are going to be taken care of. The next thing you want to make them feel is that they have some control over what goes on in their world. Nobody likes to feel like every single decision is being made for them, and kids are not exempt from that. Let them have some say, and that is a very big step to rebuilding trust. In most cases, trauma breaks trust. You have to rebuild that and reestablish that. If you don't know how, talk to a mental health professional who specializes in child development. The best way for us to support our children through trauma is to break our own trauma cycles. We don't want to continue the toxic behaviors that make the situation worse. We want them to learn how to resolve their own issues and ask for help when needed. We have to teach ourselves so that we can teach them to build a better world for those that are coming after. Next time on Thriving Throughout, we'll be discussing generational and cultural trauma. Follow me on Instagram and YouTube, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button.